Hello and welcome to edumate.tv. I'm Untitled Chapter. In our ongoing effort to bring to you literally minds from across the world, today is a very special effort. And the reason, we've got a very special guest. And that guest is from Geneva. I'd like to welcome Walter Christman, who heads a very empowered, new, a very progressive foundation of the global challenges across the world. Welcome to edumate.tv, Walter.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be with you.
All right. The name sounds so appropriate, so apt, and so relevant. So, of course, I will start by trying to know a little bit more about the foundation of global challenges.
Well, we were founded 10 years ago and launched our efforts on November 16, 2010, which preceded it, by a speech from the Chinese ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva, Ambassador He Yifei, and he spoke on global partnerships. And with that historic occasion and that speech, November 16, 2010 happened to be the United Nations designated International Day for Tolerance. So tolerance has been part of our theme. And as we moved forward from that 10 years later, which is on November 16 last year, we commemorated that event with a global partnership virtual summit for 1 year, which we just completed. And the global partnership declaration was to pursue new models of partnership. And we succeeded. We have concluded that effort with a new approach to launch under a Global Resilience Consortium, accompanied by a Global Resilience Manifesto, a new approach to bottom-up partnerships, focused in particularly on youth, cities, and communities to complement the top-down partnerships of the United Nations. So we've taken a new turn. Along the way, Delhi, India became very important, and our vice chairman, now passed, a very wonderful man, Ken Nanigan, led the effort in the development of what we called the Delhi Proclamation, and in that we issued a call for 1 million youth leaders for sustainable development beyond 2030, and a number of initiatives that I can speak to. But centered in Delhi is a core group of the foundation, all volunteers, led by John Samuel, the former Postmaster General of India. So there is a global sweep to what we do, that we have efforts across the world, but it's a very intensively led in India with some very promising initiatives I'd be happy to discuss.
Wonderful. And of course, that's going to be a very integral part of our conversation. But I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because the word global now has become commonplace, and it's very difficult to fathom any global forum in the absence of a country which houses a sixth of the world's population, and perhaps in a decade from now will supply almost half the global workforce. So the relevance, of course, gets intensified with that. But I picked up a very interesting, comment which you made, is that you are complementing the top-down approach, which obviously means that your approach should be bottom-up, which really is the need of the hour, particularly in the kind of pyramid distribution of economic wealth. So could you elaborate a little bit more?
Certainly. My co-founder, His Excellency Dr. Talal Abu Ghazala, a prominent businessman in the Arab world, led efforts in collaboration with the UN Secretary General to establish many of the top-down partnerships, notably the Global Compact, which is a relationship between the Office of the Secretary General and some 13,000 corporations around the world to adhere to standards of conduct, and so these are this and several others in the IT world. He led the effort. We basically, by 2015, when the United Nations began to invest itself in the Sustainable Development Goals to 2030, That was a very deliberate way to bring together member states and the United Nations around shareable goals to 2030. At the same time, we launched in Geneva, under what was called the Geneva Declaration, an initiative to begin studying another approach focused on resilience. And resilience in this respect is what we're talking about, the result of combining top-down and bottom-up partnerships looking beyond 2030. It's very nice to say that we have goals to 2030. Our question is, that's great, who's doing it after that? And so what we're focusing on is youth and youth empowerment at the community level, to be able to build their skills, their leadership abilities and activism. At the same time, what we see around the world is a need for a new global resilience culture. That the problems that we have, and particularly the blowback to globalization in a lot of places, is a nationalist throwback and a reaction. You see it in the United States, you see it in plenty of places in the world. And what we need to be able to do is to create a more shareable global vision toward resilience, so that the end state of sustainable development is global resilience. And so we're looking to develop a culture around that. And to that end, the Delhi Proclamation. Now, let me explain that. We came together in October 3rd, 2018, and leading up to, we had a goal to buy Gandhi's 150th anniversary birth, to bring onto the world stage this new initiative that we called 1 Million Youth Leaders for Sustainable Development. We set that as a goal in the Delhi Proclamation, and it was achieved. In September 27th, 2019, we kicked off at the Palais des Nations in the United Nations headquarters in Geneva, the 1 million 1M 2030 is what we call it, Youth Initiative, with a big event. And building from that, have held webinars and other things. The Delhi Proclamation also included within it a All India Youth Summit, which we completed this year, led by John Samuel and Sanaya Nariman, that brought together a webinar of youth from all across India and the diaspora. Our future goal, in particular of interest to, and by the way, Edumate was our media partner for that. And thank you very much. We appreciated that a lot. The thing that I mentioned, we have launched under the Global Resilience Consortium in Geneva, together with the accompanying Global Resilience Manifesto, which we published on the same day, a vision that's leading toward a Global Resilience University. The concept of 1 million, and we're talking about 1 million youth leaders, not 1 million likes on Facebook, not 1 million followers. We want to cultivate over the next 10 years around the world 1 million youth leaders for sustainable development, to build their leadership skills so that they can lead beyond 2030. The interesting thing is that this whole vision kind of got kicked off by my being contacted by a young 20-year-old girl in Delhi, a Punjabi girl, by email, wanting to be an intern, because she knew and heard that we were going to have a conference in Delhi, and could she contribute to it? Her name is Sargon Karilalia. And that whole, I had not really focused on youth leadership, but she was so persuasive that she turned the whole organization in that direction. And so we made her our youth ambassador, our first, call her the founding 1M 2030 youth ambassador. And she came to Geneva subsequently and studied in the Graduate Institute, where I actually received my own PhD. And now she's working in collaboration with the World Economic Forum. So we're basically benefiting from the youth inspirations already that steered us. And then there's something important to know. That 40% of the world's population, 42% of the world's population today is under the age of 25. By 2030, it'll be majority estimates. And so the youth are not the future, they're the present. And what we cannot do is pat them on the head and hand them a destroyed world. That basically they need to take interest in what that's all about now. within the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, which is a highly integrated and diverse list that basically focuses on all of the challenges to maintain the planet in a sustainable fashion and resilient. There is one that's particularly important and perhaps above all the others, and that's climate change. And the coming effects of climate change are probably, by scientific calculations, the negative effects accelerate considerably after 2030. So there is an upcoming event, once again in India, this time in Mumbai. In next year, in November 18 to 22, the World Congress of Accountants is gathering. And that's 130 nations, 5,000 representatives of accountants. One of the things that we're talking about with bottom-up partnerships is the idea of climate-related financial disclosures being made mandatory in corporations around the world and moving to have a proclamation, a global resilience proclamation. We'd hope to bring there. I'm just now beginning to reach out to the leadership of that organization to say we would like to come back to India and share the idea of a bottom-up partnership where investors and youth can combine to scrutinize what companies are being compliant in assisting in a better world in regard to climate change and overcoming the kind of climate inaction that we've seen even most recently in COP26 in Glasgow, with the hope that we can basically, instead of making noise about this, do our homework and understand data and accountability, and being able to lead with the corporate world as a bottom-up partner. So we're not only at community and city, we're actually to investors. And the next generation of investors, the millennials, they care about this. So we believe that with a bottom-up partnership approach with empowered youth, we actually can make a difference. Not merely talking about it, but actually doing. And that's our hope.
Wonderful, and we look forward to that, Walter. Now, you mentioned the word resilience a couple of times, which caught my attention again. And I'm going to precede that word with relevance. And since you talked about India, often the taglines for India are the world's largest democracy, right? And also one of the most world's polarized economies. But what really is our dividend, perhaps, would be demographic. Because we are the world's oldest civilization, but also the world's youngest country in terms of a mean age of 26. So the opportunity lies there, which is immense. But we cannot forget that more than half of this country is unemployed. And even greater than that is unemployable. That's one of the reasons why Edumate.tv was launched, for the purpose of employability. Now, resilience can only come about in an educated mind. An educated mind with food in the stomach, clothes to wear, and a roof on the top of his house. So in an environment which is so divided, and now increasingly so because we all belong to a digital world, the digital divide could be one of our most sinister challenges. I think on the global challenge platform, when it comes to the world's largest economy, this is the biggest challenge. So before resilience, how are you going to approach the relevance, the basics of this country?
Well, this is why we've turned to John Samuel to establish in Delhi a chapter of our Swiss Foundation. We operate in collaboration with nations in different parts of the world. And the energy that is coming from India, and by the way, our organization, no one is salaried. It's entirely a voluntary organization. And at the same time, the initiative basically that's driven is driven by the passion of people to social value and social well-being. So if we look at this as a bottom-up approach, one of the things that I think is encouraging is the attitudes of the millennial generation, at least in the developed world. There is a book that I would commend. It's written by Howard Buffett, the grandson of Warren Buffett, and it's called Social Value Investing. And what he talks about, and including with examples from India, is how impact financing for local community activity can generate sustainable development at the grassroots level. The important thing about social business is it's business, which is to say it needs to make a return on investment.
Right.
But at the same time, of course, the best way to overcome poverty is a job. And so the development in that respect of finance focused on social value and community development, hopefully in this degree to which we can encourage it, identifying youth leaders who will take the lead in developing those skills. That's what we hold out hope for the Global Resilience University to assist in providing accessible skills. But this is one of the things that comes by networks, connections, and nodes at the local level, which in many instances are quite rich. It's not as if there are no community activities or community development in these areas. In fact, very often there's quite a lot. The issue is that the top-down approach very often has outsiders coming with their help and resources and their own agendas that ultimately yield only benefit to themselves and doesn't really reach the bottom very well. So the idea of beginning bottom up with social value investing and impact financing for community level activities with youth leadership involved is how we would try to inculcate, if you will, a new approach to thinking about these things and a global resilience culture. By the way, typically, resilience is defined by various organizations is to bounce forward better, after a calamity, not only to recover, but to recover better. I define it in my book, forthcoming, Global Resilience Manifesto, as basically being freed from the organizational and intellectual impediments to agility and being able to respond. Because what holds us back very often is our mental mindsets and our organizational routines and our cultural presumptions that impede. And being able to educate ourselves beyond that, around that, in learning by doing. Basically having new thought forms, new models, new approaches of how to think about opportunity, and cooperability is a word that I use. Then it seems to me that we can handle any challenge if we have the right mindset, and we can handle no challenge with the wrong mindset. So it's all about thinking. It's all about education in that sense. But it is a learner-led experience in which not the teacher handed down as the sage on the stage, but at best the guide on the side, to facilitate a new approach to thinking in which there's actual problem-solving approaches taken on through design. And so we emphasize quite a bit of incorporating design thinking, design theory, as a participant approach to co-developing the solutions that are best defined and led locally. Then as they succeed in organizing themselves, then reaching up, then the top down, they're still there. They'll just be more effective than they were before. That's the idea.
I'm so glad that you brought up the brilliant observation of how we're limited by our own mindset. A lot of what he said, I was self-reflecting, because I've done a lot of intensive work in the field of mindfulness. Design thinking is another word which resonated with me. I studied that from your country of origin, from Stanford. And the one word which, of course, the popular word of Warren Buffett also caught my attention, because I was fortunate enough to be chosen to host him in his maiden visit to this country. And in my interview with him, the one line which I'll never forget, which he taught me, and in his own, matter of fact, yet jovial manner, he told me that, just impersonating him, that Chetan is what he used to say. My name is pronounced as Chetan, but he said, Chetan, people look at 6, and 6 stands for profit. I look at 5, and 5 precedes 6, and 5 stands for value. For me, it's all about value, it's not about profit. And that was a statement which always stuck to me. And you mentioned about social values, so it's really so relevant. So thank you for bringing up these views. But as a television presenter for the last 2.5 decades, the one question I've always raised to our government post the budget is you have these grand plans, sirs. Where is the money going to come from? Where are the funds going to come from? And I've never got an answer from the government, which is satisfactory. I'd like to hear something from you, because when you talk about sustainability, I hear these wonderful thoughts. I've known of a lot of organizations that started out with the same intention, by the way, but for some reason they tended to peter out because of the inability to sustain through funds. And that became their biggest challenge as they were trying to solve global challenges.
Well, as I said, our entire organization, there are no paid personnel in it. Basically, what comes to it is the passion of what we're doing and our connections. What we do is partner with other organizations and help facilitate them to more effective success. We would like to graduate. I think we've never yet had an endowment, and that would make it easier to sustain our efforts. And so one of the things that we're looking for in India with John Samuel's leadership is to establish an organization that might receive a sustaining endowment. But the sustaining endowment basically, pays the light bill and a few other things. But what you really need to be able to do is to focus in the networking and the synergy of ongoing shall we say, in Howard Buffett's book, he talks about cross-sector partnerships, basically the partnerships between corporations, philanthropy, civil society, and government. That the synergies among them yield much greater results, especially when you start out with a well-researched, well-developed impact financing approach that basically understands, what the entrance strategy for the investment is and what the exit strategy is and how it will be sustained. It's the question of a better business model more than it is money, because there's oceans of money out there. The thing about it is that, here in Switzerland, Swiss corporations are allowed, as my understanding, to expense off up to 10% of their profits for social investment. And the concept of that would be well served in other parts of the world. And at the same time, to be able to invest in society is investing in the well-being of businesses as well. So in that respect, it seems to me that it isn't about the money as much as it is about the process. His book is quite detailed in laying out a series of approaches to being able to identify progress and performance and accountability. That, I think, is what you really need is definable, worthwhile projects that are potentially cross-sector stakeholderships, and then build from there. And as people grow more comfortable with that emergent model, I think you'll see more success. As a matter of fact, in this conversations, the Swiss Development Agency is beginning to look into more ways how to make government development funds more effective in collaboration with corporate social responsibility funds at the community level. So this is beginning to be something that is understood around the world. It's not as if your observation that many, charitable-minded people with humanitarian values try to set up an organization and peter out because they just don't get what they need. All of these things require a certain level of endowment. They do, but that doesn't necessarily mean that has to be very much. What it has to be is initially just get into the game and sustain it. We've done this over a decade by partnering with other organizations and gathering the committed. So we kind of winnowed out the people who were looking for a job. So basically, I feel like we have something to offer as a model. That's basically our role at the moment, is to begin sharing a new approach to a vision of global resilience. As I mentioned before, the Global Resilience Manifesto we issued the other day on November 16, UN designated International Day for Tolerance to accompany the launch of the Global Resilience Consortium. I do have a book coming out at the end of the year in the UK. A fellow from India, Prabhu Guptara, he's my publisher, and he's at Cambridge. The book is Global Resilience Manifesto, which essentially has the manifesto at the beginning of the book and 7 chapters as a guide to the implementation. So that I expect to be out after the beginning of the new year. And in that respect, I hope to see it with his good assistance to be published in India and shared as a foundation of the establishment of the Global Resilience University. As I said, that's the end state for our organization, to be able to educate and equip 1 million youth leaders around the world in these concepts. That'll be an online adventure for the most part. We have a cooperation agreement with the UN Institute for Training and Research, who helped us in the beginning. We set in motion the Delhi Proclamation. The 1 Million 2030 Youth Initiative was launched in Geneva in collaboration with them. And as we get our plans together for the Global Resilience University, we'll first turn to them in collaboration with other institutions around the world. So I am basically going to be taking a foray around the world to take that on. One of my ambitions, I was nominated to be Goodwill Ambassador an advocate for global resilience for the United Nations. And so that hasn't come together yet, but I hope it does. It'll give me a little bit more brand credibility to walk around the world stage and say, hey, there's some good things here, and we can collaborate together. So that is kind of my answer to your question. What about the money? I don't think it's a problem. I think the problem is the process, and that's what we need to work on.
I do agree, and I'm glad you mentioned the corporate social responsibility, because that's been a concept which has been debated in India, but it's been debated more than it's been implemented, like a lot of things in this country. And unfortunately, it's not entirely mandatory. And it's only for a certain section of companies. And those funds too have not been very well organized or channelized. So there's an opportunity there. I do agree with you on that fact. A little bit more on the university per se, Walter. Do you have a timeline in place? What is your process? Because you mentioned that's perhaps the most important in the inculcation of this university. Where does it head out of? What are your plans? How do you plan to disseminate education? You said it's online. Have you got a structure in place, a timeline in place?
We have a vision that was conceived in collaboration with my vice chairman, who has passed away, Ken Nanigan. Dr. Ken Nanigan was a educationist, a philosopher, a theologian, and a musician in India. He was very much devoted to the integrated learning approach, and has a book published under Oxford University Press on integrated learning. So the characteristic of the Global Resilience University concept will begin with integrated learning, and the idea of bringing together heart in that heart, head, and hands, kind of a thing, yes. as he portrayed it. Ken was the driver of that, the visionary of it. We are looking in that to establish the governance structure in collaboration with the Global Resilience Consortium. So from the governance structure, what we will do in a consortium fashion is invite into this consortium educational institutions around the world who have existing programs of activity. A good one, for example, is Thunderbird, Graduate School of Business in Phoenix, Arizona. They have a similar vision of educating, more than 1 million youth leaders. But in any case, we're not the only people out here who figured out that you got to do this at scale, and at the same time, you need to bring to the table reputable institutions. There's no reason for us to recreate or create yet another competitor for resources when what we can do is network together in a consortium institutions around the world that would contribute in basically in some fashion making available either free like Coursera or for fee relevant courses. The issue is curriculum design for effectiveness, and basically being able to equip youth leaders from around the world with the best from around the world. And basically our job is to stitch that together. That's a design problem more than anything else. It's one that basically requires us to identify the existing resources, network them together, and apply them for impact. And the curation of the knowledge in my book, Global Resilience and Manifesto, I say it's built on three pillars. The first is knowledge curation, being able to identify what is the not relevant knowledge for what we're talking about. And that basically, that knowledge has value according to the user. So it isn't like we're going to go out there and try to educate on every subject. And unfortunately, and this is what integrated learning is about, is breaking down those silos that basically have created a large part of the silos of education and the silos of bureaucracy and the silos that exist in the world is a large part of the dysfunction of why things don't work. And so the approach to integrated learning is basically to integrate around diverse subjects, but to curate that knowledge, because we have Google for if we want to know everything about everything. Okay, but the point is to curate. The knowledge curation approach is basically to distill and by a collective wisdom understand what's the most relevant knowledge that can be used, and that's basically by the user's authentication. So it has to be built in collaboration with actual users. The second pillar is connectivism, and that is an approach to rethinking how we collaborate in the networked age. We're in the digital age, and the digital revolution is going to dramatically change how we communicate. And to be honest, the pandemic has done that already. The pandemic has accelerated that to warp speed, that we are rapidly moving toward a whole different approach of global integrated platform for global communications. And with that, you need a certain degree of culture to be sensible and thoughtful about how people connect and how they collaborate in this new space with deference to differences, without a hegemonic approach of Western values over everyone else's, but rather bringing everyone into a connectivist framework in which not only is information shared, but group action is possible. Under connectivism, collective action can be taken, because the connectiveness has built the frameworks of governance and collaboration so that people can act. The third pillar in my book is action learning. That's half the book. Action learning is basically building out the framework, essentially, of the kinds of things that are necessary, beginning with trust and relational trust, beginning at the same time with models of collaboration. And we have the book has outlined the Global Resilience Consortium's framework through the 1 Million 2030 initiative, to Global Resilience Partners, to a Global Challenges Situation Room, to a regional network of resilience centers around the world, consummating in the Global Resilience University. This is a very lot of shall we say, notional things out there that for people to chew on and say, well, we agree with that or we don't. But the point is, if you don't, well, you got something to react to. In any case, the building toward the Global Resilience University is action learning, put to practice around specific projects grounded in social value investing at the bottom up community level, financed with, in part, corporate social responsibility initiatives, but generally speaking, just investors. I mean, social business is business, and there are plenty of people with money who are happy to make a an adequate return doing well in a community as opposed to anything else. And at the top of the list, again, I'll come back to my previous point in Mumbai. Next year, the World Congress of Accountants, be there, because that's an opportunity to establish standards, promote standards. Actually, the standards exist. The task force on climate-related financial disclosures is headed by Michael Bloomberg, the billionaire financier in Wall Street and was mayor of New York, to develop standards so that companies can report on what their costs and liabilities are or contributions in the climate change arena. There are plenty of companies that would like to do that, but they don't self-report, because if they did, it's not a level playing field. It disadvantages them to their competitors. So this is where we can take a global mandate, cook it up, if you like, at this Congress of Accountants in Mumbai, and a Global Resilience Proclamation, and then take it to the United Nations General Assembly and ask the nations to endorse it. New Zealand is already doing this. So basically, you have an opportunity to create a level playing field so that investors can begin to invest more in green, more in companies that are climate change capable and supporting the transition to new energy, and defund those that aren't. Basically, the model in one sense is a little bit of this is an example. Stop and think about the defunding of the apartheid regime in South Africa. South Africa was able to withstand sanctions and all kinds of things for a very long time. But once investors started, major universities, endowments told their asset managers, you disinvest from every company doing business in South Africa. That brought it down. And Mandela out of prison. The thing is, follow the money. That's an example of bottom up. It's an example of knowledge. It's an example of standards. It's an example of basically collaborating in the world for our own well-being and the safety of humanity. And this, as I said, the youth of today, by 2030 are the majority of the population. And what are we going to do? Just pat them on the head and hand them a destroyed world? Nah, we need to get on with business now. We need to be able to usher into the world stage usable approaches with curated knowledge, connectivism and action learning to do simple things at the community level, and those things will add up, we hope, to a new resilience culture, a shared new set of values around the world that, while respecting everyone's local content and character and culture and the rest, it's adhering to the fact that we only have one planet. We all share it. So at some level, we ought to agree about something. And Absolutely. This is our offering. Thank you.
Wonderful to hear, particularly the last part. I mean, it's all for one and one for all. I think it's so important to recognize that. So we've got your thoughts in place, Walter, no doubt about that. You've got your vision in place, you've got your mission, your structure in place, your processes in place. I'd like you to look at a word which is very important to us at EduMate. Personally, it's my passion. It's also a very integral part of my profession as the founder of EduMate, and my life's purpose, and that is the word employability. Because everything that you said thus far will only find meaning and relevance under the headline of employability. So where does employability fit into your plan, your vision, your mission?
Well, the idea is, if you don't have a job, create one. It's as simple as that. Basically, the initiative in that is self-empowerment. And in that, our motto is be love, have joy, have courage, be empowered. In a certain sense, that if you are waiting for the world to solve all the problems in your spaces, you'll be waiting a long time. That employment begins with the self. Leaders make themselves, and the ability to collaborate with others and join in common cause, to create local initiatives, seeking out with responsible preparation and offering to investors to say, look, this is what we have to offer, this is the return that we can bring, and what we are looking for is a level playing field and a fair chance, and you'll have the benefit of participating in something that is socially valuable and redeeming. A lot of younger people, especially today, are less oriented on profit than they are on value. And the value approach is there. So bottom line, if you don't have a job, create it. There isn't anybody else to do it for you. Exactly. There are big, but the problem at the same time is global corporations in this sense are willing to collaborate and be part of that. But at the same time, the structures that are, the ladder is very high for people that often in poorer places and unemployed and disadvantaged to reach that. It's typically the elite of universities who climb the global corporate ladder. They are increasingly sensitive to the fact that the inequality of the world is something that they need to be part of fixing. So there has to be a bottom-up and top-down meeting, and in that respect, the bottom-up approach is empowerment. Again, be love, have joy, have courage, be empowered. That's the motto of the Global Challenges Forum's new initiative, the Global Resilience Consortium. And we'll all do our part. That's all we can do.
Well, this is all manna to my ears because being an entrepreneur coach myself, I mean, we often advocate the need to create jobs and just have a sense of responsibility. We believe entrepreneurship is not just about creating jobs, it's about taking on your own responsibility. And you can do that in a job itself by being an entrepreneur. But I think that the context and the concept itself has its own challenges, but it's got enormous opportunities. My one concern out here is that not all entrepreneurship, is necessarily led by job creation, particularly in a bit of a skewed financial environment, Walter, where you see the youth today, they're enamored by the stock market valuation, which is financial gains. They're looking at cryptocurrency, they're looking at Bitcoins, they're looking at all these instruments which, have been multiplying overnight. So the attraction towards that, right, in many ways is dissuading them from going to the hard grind of sustaining, creating value through people and creating jobs. So that's a bit of a concern. Is that a concern at your forum as well? No.
I would say that basically that to a certain degree, competence and contribution is a matter of self-selection. So there are those who track on Bitcoin and those things, and they have a technological leaning that helps them have the situational awareness to understand that. And they may lose their shirt too. So at the same time, risk is a matter of responding to opportunity. And social, at that respect, it's important to remember that, social business is business. It still needs to turn a profit. It needs to pay its own way and its own expenses. And that doesn't mean that everybody is going to forsake doing that for getting into Bitcoin, because I have no clue what Bitcoin's about, and I'm not going there. But it's kind of like it's in a certain sense that people self-authenticate around their capabilities, their visions and their passion and where they are. So basically what we need to do is encourage that mindset, that basically to say you can succeed. There was, one of the icons of the industrial age was Henry Ford, who brought Ford Motor Company onto the world. Henry Ford had a quote I like to repeat. He said, "If you believe you can, or you believe you can't, either way, you will be right."
Beautifully said. Well, it's about 15 minutes in this interview. We're somewhat running out of time. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, Walter. I will ask you for your closing words, but before that, I'd also like to point out some key takeaways. At Edumate.tv, we believe that the big C of COVID could be fought by the 3 C's of being corrective, collective, and creative. And you at the Global Challenge Forum Foundation are fighting the big C called challenges. And you're doing it through 3 different C's. The first, of course, is curriculum. The second C is connectivity. And the third C is culture. So with those in mind, you're creating what is a very novel concept, the fifth C, the concept, and that is of a global resilient university. Conceptually, we're extremely happy to hear of it. We're very, I'd say, enamored by your vision, encouraged by your presence, and excited by your future. So thank you, Walter, for joining us on this show. We'd like your last words before we leave you. I look forward to seeing you in person when you're in India with us. Your closing remarks.
Well, it's been my great pleasure to join you in this interview, to hear your passion and vision, because this is the kind of thing that we look to collaborate with, feed upon, draw into the other circles. So we like to be your champion too. So in that respect, we hope to cooperate and continue to develop our capabilities in India. I once again wish to acknowledge and honor the vision of Ken Nanigan, a man who has whose contributions I think will become increasingly recognized in his passing. And he's published books and many works that should be investigated about integrated learning and wholeness that we will continue to build upon. And John Samuel, the former Postmaster General of India, is taking up the leadership to establish our infrastructure in India to build this out in a local manner that can implement the Delhi Proclamation as it built, and we succeeded toward the 150th anniversary of the birth of Mahatma Gandhi as a global signature event. I mean, the essence of what we're doing worldwide was conceived in India, although it's being implemented in Geneva as a global platform, and we're carrying forward in that spirit. And so we look forward to coming to India frequently to help encourage in whatever way we can. I have also got deep ties in China, and I, the last year and a half, have lived in Saudi Arabia. We're looking to make this presence everywhere in the world. And so as we continue to move forward, we will look to India as the standard bearer, as the prototype, the sharer of best practices. So we're looking forward to hearing of all of the good results that come from the initiatives that have been undertaken, and they are many, and they are succeeding. So I thank you, and again, thank Edumate for having been our media partner for the All India Youth Summit that was held recently in fulfillment of the Delhi Proclamation, and look forward to continuing to collaborate in developing concepts around the Global Resilience University. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, and look forward to speaking to you again at another opportunity. It's been an absolute pleasure. Walter Christman, you indeed have come up with a concept which we hope will succeed, and succeed very soon. Thank you for joining us today, Delhi.
Thank you.